Barnes. This is the first demo podcast. I'm here with a good friend of mine. This is Weston Stogner.
Hi, my name is Weston Stogner. I'm a buddy of Barnes, and I'm pretty stoked to do this little conversation today.
Yeah.
Or tonight, rather.
So for this one, we're not going to be talking about a specific thing. We're just going to be talking about, current events. Because this is like a demo. We're seeing how this goes. And yeah, so this will care to join in with us and see how this goes. So let's see.
It's going to be a learning experience for both of us.
Yeah, it definitely is. We got a cool setup here. By cool, I'm using my kitchen table. I have 2 lights right now. We have 2 mics. We got this background and blue lights up. So it's a little setup, but later on it'll get a little bit better. Let's go sociology.
Sociology, you want to talk about?
My boy here, Weston, is studying sociology.
Communication studies, we're talking about social sciences, people, social groups, organizations, all those things. Interactions, relationships, the psychology behind all that. So, it's pretty interesting stuff. But we're talking about Kanye West.
Yeah?
It reminded me. Yeah. But all that stuff, it's pretty interesting. Going over old movies, music,
and how it was viewed back then versus how it's viewed now too.
Yeah, exactly. You can reflect on like even how science fiction films from the 50s compared to science fiction movies now. Science fiction movies like we're talking about young adult novels like the Divergent series or the Hunger Games.
Oh yeah.
Those are like kind of, they have these political undertones, Hunger Games is kind of anti-establishment,
right?
A little revolutionary fervor. Right. The Divergent series, a little bit of that too.
Right, and like the big thing that the Hunger Games has is like anti-elitism too, big time.
Yeah, and you have your symbolism with the 3-finger whatever.
Right, the thrice, the Greeks would call it.
Really?
Yeah, the Greeks call it the thrice.
And what would that symbolize?
Well, it's just in the Greeks, the greatest number is 3 because they believe everything was made out of 3.
Oh.
Time, space, and matter. They had it as heaven, earth, and water.
Yeah.
Through everything is made up by not everything. Almost everything is made up by 3. Kind of coincides with Christianity too, with the idea of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We're made out of body, soul, human. Wait, what are we made out of? Body, soul, and spirit.
Oh.
So that's what the 3 is a big, huge symbol.
Yeah.
It's the idea of completeness too, like a triangle.
Yeah. And numbers just help you retain better, so I can see how that could carry on throughout the centuries or whatever, or eras. But comparing like those movies I'm talking about now, those are for younger audiences like Divergent, and those are like young adult novels, like I said. And something else about them. But comparing them to movies from like the 50s, those are more like, you can be any audience, but it could be like 20 and over, those who can vote. They're dealing with Cold War issues, race issues, feminist issues, for example, things like that. And so, yeah, whatever's going on at a certain point of time is going to show up in the popular culture. Whether it be at movies, music, or, anything, advertisements, for example.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. A lot of even like I know like with even the Barbie movie even had that too.
Oh well, yeah, you're dealing with feminist values and ideas, things like that.
Well, I didn't mean like in the beginning of the movie, doesn't it like kind of model what's that other movie, the one of the apes and then looking at the thing.
To 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Right.
Just playing at the Alamo Drafthouse. You guys should go check it out.
Go check it out, guys.
Yeah,
it's a good movie. But they do with the Barbie, like the kids are playing with the little babies. They break them, and then they see the Barbie, and it's all about like she looks pretty, she's tall. She's
and in 2001:
character.
A Space Odyssey, what they were doing in that was like the Stone Age. What was being introduced at that time? I guess
like technology, fire. Because I think in that movie, yeah, they
I guess I need to watch it.
I can't remember. I forgot what happens, but they hit it. Something happens.
Like a spark flies.
A spark flies. The stick goes up. The stick is the tool, and it's like we no longer are going to be monkeys or whatever.
That's a pretty
apes
sick intro.
were gonna be.
Isn't there like some
something higher.
black door or something like that that just stands?
I think so.
That shows space.
I can't remember, but the whole idea is that
I need to watch that movie.
we were animals, and now we're a higher set of beings.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in the Barbie thing is that the girls were no longer just taking care
Dealing
of
with
babies.
dolls and babies. They weren't
Now they're beautiful, strong
women.
women, or I guess. I mean, it could mean. I guess Barbie. When did Barbies first come out? What? Can you look
Like
that
the
up?
40s,
40s, right?
50s.
I guess it could mean that, or it could be, or maybe it was just the idea of wanting to look pretty is another thing, or
1959. So
1959.
50s. Yeah.
Being able to have your own character, your character has their own life.
But even Barbie's gone through developments as well. Like,
oh right, yeah.
yeah.
Like I know in the beginning, I was like, I think it was the princesses first, and then it was like civilian life, and then it was into like different forms.
I was under the impression that the first Barbie was just some small town girl from like Wisconsin.
Okay, then yeah, I probably.
But
had that
you know,
backwards.
you also have your Barbie princesses and things like
Right,
that.
right,
That's
right.
how it expanded over the years.
Right, because even in the Barbie, even in the Barbie princesses things, there's like a prince that she falls in love with, but she tends to be the top G. Like she tends to be like the main girl.
Oh yeah, it's all about Barbie. No one cares about Ken. You see that in the movie.
Exactly, that's exactly what I mean. So it's interesting that you see that change go on. I mean, even with like a good example too, Oppenheimer. Like at that time period, everyone was happy with the nuclear bomb in the United States because he was like, yeah, we kicked Japan's butt, and now we're the strongest superpower in the world. We have the weapon of death. However, you saw early stages in that period of scientists and people who knew.
Oh, well, even Matt Damon's character
Right.
in the film was warned about the issues post a bomb going off, like the radiation poisoning and things like that.
That too,
increased cancer.
Right,
risks.
and then after I think the 60s or not during the 60s, when the Cold War came effect, everyone in the United States started not liking a nuclear bomb because of the scares and the fear of the Tsar bomb.
And that's
went
even
off.
going back to like the 50s movies we're talking about, with The Day the Earth Stood Still or like Time Machine. These films that like comment on advances in technology, but they could be a detriment to civilization or humanity as we know it, because they can destroy the world, cause a nuclear holocaust.
Right, yeah, that'd be insane.
So-
I wouldn't know it's crazy how like since then we've had a triumph. Like I'm using the nuclear bomb as an analogy, and I guess how it changed from sociology to now. To nuclear bomb was, we have it with the strongest. 50s, 60s, it's like, wow, we're like at arms race against our fellow man and all that stuff. Then nuclear bombs become more of a deterrent because then we realize, hey guys, if we do go to nuclear war, we'll pretty much kill everything on the planet. So it's like a last resort type of thing.
Yeah.
To then war and espionage, and then before the Vietnam War, like exactly World War II, vets were welcome, they were loved, they were heroes. During Vietnam, they came back, they were hated by the hippies, they were called...
Well, during Vietnam, and because there's like it was such a complex time, the 60s, you know, we're dealing with civil rights, we're dealing with feminist issues, or feminist rights, we're talking about even Native Americans with the American Indian movement, things like that, wanting to reclaim land or gain sovereignty in their lands. It was just a polarizing time. It kind of reflects what's going on now, you know, with our Black Lives Matter groups and our social groups.
And even in another thing that's really interesting too, because I've been looking at this and studying this too, is that during the 30s, actually, let's say the late 30s, the ending of World War II to the 50s and to the 60s, you also had a big move of, let's say, like agnostic and atheism that came in because of science.
The 60s?
Yeah,
50s?
let's say the 40s to 60s, because of the nuclear age, the scientific discoveries and all this stuff. A lot of atheists and agnostic came. Then you had the hippie movement that came in, and then you saw the change between, oh wow, we don't like how these people were in the 40s and 60s, because everything is rationalized, but everything's about love, everything's about emotions. So then people were getting into drugs, but then during the 60s, it wasn't doing well with the drugs because people were getting sick.
We're also talking post rock and roll.
That too, right?
So
that was the thing that blew
popular
up too.
culture. That's
popular
another
culture.
how
And
it shapes
then,
reality.
I think in the late 60s, early 70s, you had the huge Jesus movement that was gigantic. With Billy Graham who came in, he was the biggest televangelist.
Well, we're talking about the 80s.
Right, that came up. I'm just talking about like from the 40s to the 80s. You had the transition from the rational to the feels, the emotions, the rock and roll, to drugs.
Yeah.
To like that's back to science because the drugs is like the chemical makeup, but it still didn't satisfy, I guess, the people's souls. To then back to faith, and then the 80s and 90s, you kind of had. I mean, you still had the line of the idea of faith and all that stuff.
But you're going to see these trends in history, you know, like we're talking about America during the 20th century. We can compare it to like revolutionary times in France during like the 18th century. Like these fluctuations or these shifts in power, you know, you go from the radical progressive revolutionaries of like Maximilian Robespierre to the conservative figures of like Napoleon and things like that, empire builders.
Right, that's true. Even
then back to it just kind of flips and flops.
Even during, let's go a little bit more further back with the Greeks and Romans. The Greeks went through the same period of thinking, issues, welfare, and even social behaviors that the Romans did to their collapse. Just as the Greeks collapsed, so the Romans collapsed the same way. And they followed the same trend. Like there's a saying in the Bible, there's nothing new underneath the sun, meaning that there's anything that happens or anything that we think is, oh, this is new, this has never happened before, it's already happened in the past. Just maybe at a different frequency.
Yeah.
Or in a different occasion. Like it's obvious that we didn't have cars in the Greek period, but there was transportation.
Patterns. Yeah.
There was paths. So that's still something that's not new.
You're going to see similar factors and similar results. People have the same biological makeups and still made similar decisions to people in the past, and it's just in different contexts, different situations,
right.
Nations and states.
Yeah, but we just tend to view it differently because we're living in the now versus that was in the past.
But you could also argue that since like industrialization and globalization, the way technology is advanced, like we're living in a pretty rapidly paced,
evolving
kind of society. Yeah, because the world has never been more interconnected. It's never been as advanced as rapidly as it is today. So
that's true. You know, the innovative would be is like there's nothing new. However, there's more of everything. There's more.
And that's not necessarily better.
Yeah, right. This idea more is never necessarily better. They say less could be better too. And it's interesting in how the social dynamics too, because like I mean, I'm sure you've seen it like in film and all that stuff. I mean, here's a good example. There's a lot of movies recently in the last I think 5 years ever since COVID, movies showing perspectives of like people at home talking through Zoom or people through text talking. And people get emotionally connected to those movies because they can relate to those movies because of texting or Zooming. Versus back in the 50s and 60s, it's just a romantic flick or something like that. The person would go meet the person, to go have dialogue. If they couldn't see the person, they'll be at home, maybe writing a letter to that person.
So you're talking about movies now that deal with romance through computers and Zoom?
Or romance
like
through communication. It's different. So like in the movies, and it can seem kind of artificial to me. I find it kind of artificial. But let's say you're talking to a person you love in a movie. Let's say in the movie there's like two characters, if you could imagine. There's two characters. They're zooming each other. They're talking to each other. And during the movie, you're watching it and they're in love, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's the way they communicate their love to each other. It doesn't have the same behaviors or actions as a film from, let's say, the 80s or 90s, where the person had to go meet with that person and talk with them, or they had to talk on a landline.
Yeah.
And some could argue maybe back then that was more romantic to how it is today.
Yeah.
Or people could even argue that's what's an issue with today. And but it could also argue the issue with the past is like, hey, if you need to talk to your lover about someone back then, you have to go find them, and then what if it's too late or what if it's too gone? Versus the other one is what if you're too much with it, or maybe you become too obsessed about the individual, so then the person could become like a social stalker.
I see your point. Yeah, there are pros and cons to every era. I think you're going to get some benefits that advance society, and then you're going to get some things that may not be carried on into the future or are going to be remembered as fondly as things are in that present state. So yeah, technology does connect us in more efficient ways, but it also can be a detriment in creating intimate relationships and maintaining those relationships.
Right.
So yeah, it all depends on where you are too. So we're talking about context, position, who you are as a person too, your morals and ethics. So
right, that's a big one. That's definitely a big one, because there's actually a really interesting philosophical thought. As technology gets better, do we as beings, or we as beings of emotions, beings of thought, are better because of it? Or what needs to continuously develop is our moral behavior? What is a better what's the word I should say? What is a better invention or better upgrade? Moral development or technological development?
I guess it all rests on perspective. So if you're talking from a societal point of view, and I hate saying that word, society, societal, going back to Joker references, but I think from a societal perspective, we're talking about institutions, we're talking about political leaders and maintaining power. They're going to probably go towards something that might not necessarily be as morally profound or, human, I guess, or authentic in a way. Because, society itself is not human. It's not going for the individual. It's going for the system in place. So if you're going from that perspective, but if you're an individual within that society, you have your own ideas, you're an individual, you're probably going to want to be more free. If we're talking about, you don't want it to stray too close to moral corruption, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Speaking on the moral side, I tend to think that, especially because morals could change a lot of the time, depending on the social issues or social climate or culture. That's why, I'm biased. I believe you need to have a foundation of truth and an objective truth, so that those morals can continuously grow. And if they continuously go generational, you could start raising up, individuals that know right from wrong, and based off of the basic, I guess you would call it the Western idea, but I would call it the Abrahamic ideals of what is right and wrong. And that is a detriment that's super important, because if you look, we have history as our evidence, I guess, and why it's super important that the morals don't sway so much, or the morals don't change as much. Of course, you have to be in context, because there's people who have also abused the Abrahamic view.
But going back to a point, I just want to say we're talking about
make this motion so I know to cut from here.
Technological advancement, moral advancement. Society, you could argue, could also create the morals. Those Western ideas. We call them Western ideas because they're from the West. West is like a culture. Right. It's people that are ruling. It's with the hierarchies and things like that. So, but that kind of ties into what you're going on about right now with technology and moral advancement being factors of a society. So they might not intertwine necessarily, but they could at certain times.
Right. That's why I was saying that, I think the moral development's important, because for example, he's the monarch. I don't know if it caught that last part, but you have a monarchy, it's a good nation, the morals are right, let's say it's Abrahamic tradition, and then the king's kids are bickering among themselves, there's jealousy or whatever, and then he dies and they come into power, and the technology that was being used for good is not being used for bad, so then agency goes against each other, and then now you have death going on, and the technology turned into weapons of destruction, all that stuff. And at the same time, though, what Weston, I think we were saying, technology can help change the moral code. For example, let's say like I think like in hospitals, let's say before medicine came around, right? Like let's say before penicillin came into existence, especially with vets or soldiers who got killed. They're like, hey man, just don't take care of him, take care of the next person. This guy's gonna die anyway.
Yeah.
But so then the moral was like, okay, this guy is just a dead corpse now. I'm gonna go to this next person. But then penicillin came in, right? And then no, not penicillin. Is it penicillin?
Oh, what were we talking about?
Like the thing that helps you, is it morphine?
Morphine, yeah.
My bad, sorry guys. Morphine. Morphine comes in.
Penicillin can be used to treat infections, I guess.
I guess both. Well, either way, morphine, penicillin, whatever, comes in. Hey, you're able to treat this person who has this wound now, and now it's like no longer I see this person as a corpse. I see this person as like it's possible they're living now. So that technological advances has now changed a field in the hospital area where now we treat these victims more seriously than we did beforehand. Or even transportation, I guess. Another one, a good example would be like, we can't go help those people over there because they're too far away from us. Well, how about we develop, let's say it's in the mountains or something like that. Like, okay, we have like these what are they called? Like the snowmobiles, whatever. I'm just gonna call them snowmobiles.
Yeah.
They invent those things. They go out there, they're able to communicate with them and be of service to a fellow neighbor. So it could go vice versa. But I still think of a moral foundation, and I would say specifically like the Abrahamic tradition is the way that I think society could progress. Society could continue to flourish in a healthy manner. But of course, I mean, the problem is no society in history has ever, survived since the beginning.
Everything comes to an end.
Right. I mean, you could argue, I guess, Israel, but I mean, that's more of a people than it was like a government, because they got taken over and
Ethnic group, yeah.
right, and they got taken over, and then they even betrayed themselves.
We don't even know about people pre-recorded history. We're talking about written accounts and things like that.
Oh, kind of like in
Neanderthals, or we're talking about the Clovis people. And even the people that migrated from Africa to places like Asia and to the Americas and things like that.
Right. There's like on top
there
of
are so many histories and tribal
that are
societies.
lost. Like with the Olmecs or the Toltec, whatever.
We only have archaeological data.
Right. They built their temples on top of other temples that were older than that one. So if you dug into the temples all the way to the bottom one, you'd find some like, oh, well, there was a society here. We don't know much about them, but we just know they existed based off this pyramid and some very few evidence that we have of them. But they're all destroyed because the other society that toppled over them took control.
I think at the end of all of this, we're just people, and everything we made that we think are so important today are just going to be dust thousands of years from now.
Totally. That's exactly.
The only thing that's for sure or for certain, I don't care what you believe, religious, not religious, is like the universe, the environment, all that stuff, like space and time or things like that.
Well, there's an interesting concept in Ecclesiastics. Let me see if I can pull that up. Ecclesiastics says that it's a book in the Bible. It's a book of wisdom, and it talks about that all these earthly things, all these carnal things, carnal means senses, but by senses it means like these physical objects, don't matter. They come away, they're dust, they're in the flicker of an eye.
Yeah.
And what matters is in the Christian interpretation,
being in the moment. You're alive for a reason.
Right. And the Christian interpretation is what matters is the heaven, the eternal. What is the heavenly reward? What is the thing that's eternal, not the thing that's finite? And I mean, you could take it in a metaphysical, non-religious claim, but I mean, you inevitably kind of do take it in a religious term of the universe because it's infinite. Kind of like how I think Spinoza, he was a naturalist.
Spinoza.
Yeah, Spinoza. He was a philosophical naturalist. He talked in very theological terms, but he was a naturalist. He believed in the universe being God.
Scientific method to philosophy by affirming that all beings and events in the universe are natural.
Yeah.
All knowledge of the universe falls within the pale of scientific investigation.
Yeah,
Interesting.
if you look up Spinoza, he's a big person from the modern philosophical period.
Yeah, that's what it's saying. Naturalist. Hey, is that your foot? Oh, it's a dog.
Oh yeah. Let's see.
How long have we been going on?
We've been going on for 45 minutes. Let's end it let's finish off with this, but let me give you an example from Ecclesiastes. It's pretty interesting because it talks about it literally is exactly what you said. Meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, and the hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north, and round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea,
That's a
yet
poem?
the sea is never full. It's from the book of Ecclesiastes.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's a philosophical. It's a wisdom book. It's a book of wisdom.
Yeah.
It's the Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job are the books of wisdom in the Bible. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. That's what I mentioned earlier. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here for our time. No one remembers the former generations, kind of like what you were talking about. And even
Everything
those
gets lost.
right, and even those yet to come will not be remembered, but those who follow them.
Our statues will crumble.
Right,
Things like that. Yeah.
and that's Ecclesiastes. That
Become part of
sums
the
it-
earth.
Right, it sums it all up that nothing on earth is dust will
It's
go
all
away.
finite. Yeah.
It's all finite. And what matters is the eternity, the thing that's, I guess, important, or legacy.
We
I
take
guess.
life for granted.
Well, not even legacy. I mean, just that.
It's beautiful stuff, but it's also terrifying.
It is, yeah, it is. But I mean,
Terrifyingly beautiful.
terrifyingly beautiful. I would say, if you're a believer or if you believe in God, it's not necessarily scary because you believe in the idea of eternity still. But the idea that makes it scary is that like everything that we do in life, like even this, probably won't matter because someone 100 years from now.
Some jerk off 500 years from now is going to do a podcast just like this, but
Right,
it's going
right.
to be like holograms or whatever.
Right.
Or they're probably not even going to have human bodies by then. They're just going to be like
All right, we're just gonna be like
turned
robots.
back into cells or something like that. Or,
Yeah, he's gonna be like, oh, bro, this has never been happened before. It's gonna be
Yeah.
it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be the same house, but just with robot bodies.
And it's going to be a floating house. It's probably not even going to be a house. They're going to have like holographic or like it's going to be in space probably.
That'd be pretty cool.
Astronauts.
That'd be pretty cool. Well, this was our first demo podcast. I'm glad to do this with my friend Weston. We had a pretty interesting conversation. We went over politics. We went over the plane crash. We went
Pop
over
culture.
sociology, pop culture.
Science fiction movies, 50s compared to now.
We went over events and corresponding morals and societal issues, and
Technological advancements.
some philosophical and religious outlooks.
All sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
A little bit of comedy.
Please let me know what you guys think. Give me grace because Weston's not setting up this whole thing. He's my guest. But he helped me out. He
Let
helped
us
me
know
set
in the
up.
comments.
Yeah. But give me grace. I'm gonna have a better setup soon, probably in a week or 2 weeks from now. This will all be in the garage, and you
Better
guys will
guest,
see it soon.
hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully a better guest. I'm kidding. No, Weston was great. And for the next one, I'll post like a preview of what that next podcast would be. What I'll do is that I'll post a short, let's say a minute video or even like a story on my Instagram, so you guys can have an idea what it's about, so you guys can tune in on it if you want to. Because I know waiting or sitting around for like over an hour and it's nothing that you're interested in might be boring. But thank you guys.
Thanks for having me. This